most of you were looking at this warm-up saying, Mister, I can set it up, but I don't know how to solve it. I don't know how to get an answer. I don't know how to find the degrees. So let's see what we can do. So let's see how far we can go. So whenever you have a problem, this is what you should do in life, not just in math, but in life. If you have a problem in front of you and you don't know how to solve it, any problem, any kind of problem, doesn't have to be a math problem. Go as far as you can, right? Understand what's going on in the situation, right? That whole problem solving, understand that whole thing, and go as far as you can. And then stop, and then that's where you start asking questions. That's where you start doing your learning. So let's look at this and see if we understand the situation. There's no words here, so it's not like a word problem where we have to understand. So we got to understand what's going on. Well, we see this. That's a right triangle. And try to connect it to what we've been learning. So, oh, duh, it's a right triangle. So let's first identify what the legs are, which is this side and this side. Those are my legs. And the hypotenuse is this. Okay? So we have the legs and the hypotenuse identified. Every right triangle should always identify that because, you know, you can use Pythagorean theorem, leg squared plus leg squared equals hypotenuse squared, or we can't do that because we have an angle. Pythagorean theorem has nothing to do with angles, so we know we're not going to use Pythagorean theorem. So, good job in the chat. Yes, you're correct. So we look at the angle, right? This is the angle that we're focused on. That's the angle that we want to know. And then what do we have? We have the opposite side, and we have the hypotenuse. So which one is opposite and hypotenuse? Well, we remember so, ka, toa. Oops. All right, and we see which one has opposite hypotenuse? Exactly, sine. So let's set up our equation. Sine of what? Well, the sine of the angle, right? Because it's always in reference to the angle we're focused on. Sine of x degrees, we don't know what it is, it's called x degrees, equals opposite, which is 15, over hypotenuse, which is 24. So hopefully you got that far. Hopefully you got that far. Is there any questions? Okay, any questions how we got that far? So always go as far as you can. Understand what's going on in the picture or the situation. What is it supposed to be opposite of? As I've been saying before, of the angle. That's why we're finding sine of an angle, right? From the angle. It's always in reference to whatever angle we're standing at. Remember, we started talking wherever we're standing at. That angle is where we're standing. So opposite is over there. Adjacent is right here. Right? It's always opposite and adjacent are always talking about the legs. Right? That's why we have the sine of an angle, because that's the angle we're standing at. If we were over here, it would be a different story. Right? If we were over here, that's opposite and that's adjacent, but we're not over there. We're right here. So yeah, that's a great question. Some people are still getting confused about that because this is new. You will see this again in Algebra 2 next year, so that's good. So this is kind of your introduction. So that way when you go deeper next year in Algebra 2, it's not as confusing. Okay? It's not as confusing. So yeah, so it's always sine of it. That's why we take a sine of an angle, because that's the angle we're standing at, and that's what opposite of that angle or adjacent to that angle. And then hypotenuse is always just hypotenuse. Okay, so now we're stuck here. How do we get rid of this? Well, in equations, in order to get rid of stuff, we do the opposite operation, right? If we were adding, we would subtract, because that's the inverse operation. If we were multiplying to x, we would divide, because that's the opposite or inverse operation. So what are we doing to x here? We're taking the sine of x. So what's the inverse of the sine of x? Well, if you paid attention to your calculator, let's see, maybe I can show you. If you paid attention to your calculator, right? Here's your calculator. And yes, you can see the reflection of the camera. So here's your calculator. And if you look here, oh, my battery's low. Okay. And if you look here, here's sine, cosine, and tangent, right? Your calculator should have sine, cosine, and tangent. All your calculators should have sine, cosine, and tangent. But if you look above sine, cosine, and tangent, what do you see? Right? A lot of calculators, each button is really two buttons. It's the one that's written on the button, and then right above it, it's also that if you hit this second key, right, or the shift key. It depends on the calculator. It's different things. So this sine is also this sine to the -1. This cosine is also the cosine to the -1, and this tangent is also the tangent to the -1. What does that mean? Well, that little sine to the -1, sometimes you'll hear it called arc sine or arc cosine or arc tangent. Those are the inverse tangent, inverse cosine, inverse sine. And so that's what we do. So we go over here, and if we want to get rid of sine, we get the whole side, and we take the inverse sine of that side. And whatever we do to one side, we got to do to the other, so we take the inverse sine of this side. And the reason we do that is because inverse sine and sine cancel each other out. Remember, inverses cancel each other out. So we're left with x degrees equals, and then over here we have the inverse sine of 15 over 24. And so how the heck do we do this, mister? I'll show you with your handy dandy calculator. So you go over here, and then you hit second, and then sine, and then that'll give you the inverse sine. And what are we taking the inverse sine of? 15 divided by 24. And then you hit enter, and there it is, 38.7 degrees. 38.7 degrees. Okay, so again, the calculator just does all the work. So basically, the inverse sine is basically asking what angle are we getting? So when you do the inverse sine, it cancels out. The same thing would work with cosine. If this was cosine, we would use the inverse cosine. And it's just a button on our calculator which asks, what is the angle that gives me this ratio? That's all it's doing. When I look at this right here, this is saying what angle has sine as this ratio. And the angle is 38.7. And the calculator would do all the work for you. Okay, I'll give you a second to copy that down and ask questions. So again, we're doing the same setup, right? We're still finding these are the legs. That's the hypotenuse, right? We're still doing the same setup. Those are the legs. That's the hypotenuse. Okay, and so we look at the angle, and we see that we have opposite and we have hypotenuse, right? So that's sine. So this in red right here is the setup. Is everyone good with the setup? Sine of this angle, and in this case it's x degrees, we don't know what it is, equals opposite, which is 15, over hypotenuse, which is 24. So are we good? Show me a thumbs up, or yes, or something. Come on, guys. I need to hear some type of response. Are we good with just the setup? We're good with the setup. Okay, good. Easy setup. The new part is, okay, now that we set it up, repeat what again? These are the legs. This is the hypotenuse. This is what we've been doing for the past 2 weeks, right? These are the legs. These are hypotenuse. And this is the angle. Remember, step 2 is look at the angle, and what information do they give us relating to that angle? Well, they give us the opposite side, right? Because here's the angle, and this side over here is this leg over here is the opposite. This leg would be the adjacent one, but they don't give us this one. They give us the leg that's opposite. Remember, it's either opposite or adjacent. That's what these OAs mean. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. Tangent is opposite over adjacent. And somebody asks, opposite of what, mister? Of the angle. That's why we take a sine, cosine, or tangent of an angle, because that's the angle we're standing at. Imagine you're standing right there. And so this is the opposite. This is the hypotenuse. And that's what sine is. Sine is opposite over hypotenuse. That's why we put the opposite side, 15, over hypotenuse. Remember, sine, cosine, and tangent are just ratios. They're just fractions we create. And that's how we create our equation. The sine of that angle is the opposite leg over the hypotenuse. So there's our equation. So now once we have our equation, we need to get x by itself. That means I need to get rid of sine. But I can't just cross it out and say, oh, it's gone. In equations, in order to get rid of things around x, around our variable, we have to do the opposite. Right? If x was being added, if 3 was being added to x, we would subtract 3, because subtraction is the inverse operation of adding. So what's the inverse operation of sine? Well, I showed you on the calculator. It's this sine to the -1. That's called inverse sine or arc sine. Just know it as inverse sine. You'll hear arc sine maybe later in your math career, but not right now. Right? And I showed you in the calculator. If you look above sine, cosine, and tangent, there's inverse sine, there's inverse cosine, and there's inverse tangent. And it's on your calculator. It just means the inverse. It just means finding the angle. So when I take the inverse sine of this side, I need to take the inverse sine of this side. So these cancel, and this becomes x degrees. I got the x by itself of the inverse sine of that ratio. And basically, the inverse sine is just saying, hey, what angle has a sine that's this ratio? What angle has a sine that's this ratio? And you plug it into your calculator. Right, that's what we did. My battery's low. Thank you. We plugged into our calculator. We said second sine, right? And it gave us inverse sine of 15 over 24. 15 over 24. Close my parentheses, and then I just hit enter, and there it is, 38.7. And make sure your calculator is in degree mode. You see how it says degree right there? Your calculator would have a little D or DEG. If it's an R or RAD or radian, take it out. It's not. You need to go to your settings and put in degree mode, or else you get something wrong. Okay, and that's how we get our answer. All right, let's see if you can try one yourself. Try this one. Try this one. Okay, I know you saw this one, and it's a little like, okay, I kind of get it. So try this one. I'll give you 5 minutes. All right, time is up. Time is up. So hopefully you got the setup right, and you just need the calculator part to get this. So let's do this. First step, which sides are the legs? And those are the legs. How do you know those are the legs? Because those are the two that form the right angle. The two sides that make that right angle are your legs. And then the long side over here, that's your hypotenuse. Okay, so now you got to ask yourself, which one am I using? Am I using sine, cosine, or tangent? Right, sine, cosine, or tangent. SOHCAHTOA. Right, the SOHCAHTOA helps you remember the ratios, right? And so when we look here, here's the angle. Again, always focus on the angle you're at the angle that they want or the angle that you know. And there's that angle. And so what leg are we talking about? Are we talking about the opposite leg or the adjacent leg? And it looks right here, it's the adjacent leg, right? And the hypotenuse. So which one has adjacent and hypotenuse? Anybody? Which one has adjacent leg over hypotenuse? That's cosine. That's cosine right here, right? And how do you know? Because it's right here. Ca, C-A-H. The C stands for cosine. The A stands for adjacent. The H stands for hypotenuse. Adjacent over hypotenuse. And so let's set that up. Cosine of what? Cosine of the angle, right? Because the angle is always where we're standing. The cosine of that angle, right? Because that's where we're standing. We're not over here, right? We're not over here. We're right here. So this is the angle. That's why that's adjacent to that angle. Okay, so we have cosine of x degrees equals adjacent, which is 8 over hypotenuse. Hopefully you got this far. You set it up. So now I want the x by itself. So I'm going to have to take, that's cosine, right? So what's the inverse of cosine? Inverse cosine. So I take the inverse cosine of that side, and I take the inverse cosine of that side. These cancel. And so I have x degrees equals inverse cosine of 8 over 11. And some of you are like, huh? How do I, oh, I'm sorry. This is covering. How do I do that, mister? Mike, so let's first look at your calculator, right? So if you're using an iPhone, you can do your calculator, and you see this second key right there. See that second key? Hit second, and look what you'll see: cosine, sine, inverse cosine, inverse tangent. It's right there. You have to hit that second. But what's different? What's different about phone calculators is you don't put it in this order, right? You don't put it in this order in your calculator. You put this first, right? So you put 8 divided by 11, then hit enter, get a number. Then you hit the inverse cosine and it'll get it for you. So let's try it like that. So you would put 8 divided by 11 and hit equals, and there's your decimal. And then you're going to hit second and then inverse cosine, and there it is, 43.34. Okay, so you got to put the number in first and then do the inverse cosine. That's how the phone calculators work. It's a little backwards. Okay, on the fancy schmancy calculators, you can put it straight in. But mister, I don't have a fancy schmancy calculator. Okay, that's okay. If you don't have a fancy schmancy, I'll show you if you want one. Because you're like, some of you are like, mister, we got 43.3 degrees. Mister, I want to use a fancy schmancy. Okay, so let's try a fancy schmancy for free. So go to Google and put Google calculator, and look what you're going to see. You're going to see a calculator right here. You got mine. You got your calculator at the 99. Yeah, you can get a scientific calculator at the 99-cent store. You can. But if you want a free one, just go to Google Calculator and then you see inverse. You see the inverse button right there. Hit inverse, and then see all those 3 sine, cosine, tan. See it, they're right there. So you hit your inverse key, and then you'll say, and then you just do it in the same order, inverse cosine. And now you see how it says arc cosine up there? That's the same thing, don't worry. Of, what was it? It was 8 over 11. Of 8 divided by 11, close your parentheses, hit equals, and bam, that's wrong. That's wrong. You know why? Look at this. You see my calculator's in rad. We need to put it in degrees. There's my problem. So I made a mistake. I got the wrong answer. Always make sure your calculator's in degrees, not radians, not rad. It has to be in degrees. So let's try that again. Okay, so I'm going to clear that. That was wrong. I'm going to put inverse cosine of, what was it? 8 divided by 11. 8 divided by 11. Close my parentheses, hit equals, and there it is. There it is. Make sure it's in degrees. 43.34. Okay, so Andy gave advice. You can go to the 99 and get a nice scientific calculator. It works perfectly, he says. If you don't want to go to the 99, you can go to Google Calculator and do it here. Or you can use your phone. But again, the phone, it works a little backwards. If you want to just go straight forward and just type it in the way the problem is, you can do it that way. Are there any questions? Should we do one more? Should we do one more? I think we should. I want to answer any questions you have, though. Before I answer, I'm going to go one more. So there's number 2. We set it up the same way. We find the legs. We find the hypotenuse. We look at the angle that we're focused on, and that's the angle we're focused on because that's the one we're looking for. And then we say, okay, what did they give us? What leg did they give us? And did they give us the hypotenuse? And they gave us the adjacent leg and the hypotenuse. So if we have the adjacent hypotenuse, that's cosine. So that's how we set up this equation. The cosine of that angle, cosine of x degrees, which we don't know, equals adjacent 8 over hypotenuse 11. And then we just take the inverse cosine of both sides. And the reason we do that is so this cosine can cancel out with the inverse cosine, and we're left with x degrees. And then we have inverse cosine of 8 over 11, and we just punch that into our calculator, and we get our answer. Remember, inverse cosine just is asking, hey, what angle, when you see inverse cosine, you know you're going to get an angle. Because it's asking, hey, what angle has a cosine of that ratio? And the calculator tells you, oh, it's 43.3 degrees. And you're perfectly done. All right, let's try one more. Let's try this one. Let's try this one. Give you 5 minutes again. Time is up. Okay, so let's go into there. So again, I'm sorry for not showing you again. For the video people, go to courses, go to our course, go to week 16. And in week 16, you'll see finding angle measures notes, finding angle measures note solutions. So all the answers to everything that we're doing in the notes, and then the homework that's due next Monday. So I'm sorry I didn't show you that at the beginning. I usually do, and this time I forgot. But thank you, chat. That you always have to keep me on my toes, right? Just like I keep you on your toes and I call you on things, you need to tell me things. Hey, mister, you forgot this, or you need to do that. I got a job, you got a job, right? So we got to make sure we do, both of us do our jobs. So thank you for that. Okay, so first, that's my leg, and there's my hypotenuse. And there's the angle I'm focused on. Okay, that's the angle I'm looking for. So I need to ask myself, what are we doing? Well, if you notice, there's no hypotenuse, right? There's no hypotenuse. So if we have no hypotenuse, we're not going to do that one or that one because those both have hypotenuse. So it's probably going to be tangent, which is opposite over adjacent. And that's exactly what they gave us, the opposite side and the adjacent leg of that angle. So that means we're going to use tangent. So let's set it up. Tangent of that angle, tangent of x degrees, is opposite side or opposite leg, 7, over adjacent leg, 5. And there's our setup, okay? It's tangent of that angle because we have opposite leg over adjacent leg. That's opposite over adjacent. And so now I want to get the x by itself. So to get rid of tangent, I have to do the inverse tangent. And I need to do it to both sides. Cancel, cancel. X degrees equals the inverse tangent of 7 over 5. And get your handy dandy calculator. And so let's just do this one. Right? Or use your own calculator. So let's clear this out. So we do the inverse tangent, or arctan, okay, same thing, of 7 over 5, 7 divided by 5, and close that parentheses and hit equals, and we get 54.5, right? Because that 6 makes that 4 go up, so it's 54.5 degrees. And there you go. Easy peasy, right? So we're going to do some classwork tomorrow, some more practice. Okay, you can start the homework tonight. I really suggest you start the homework tonight, and then we'll do an activity where we practice this. Okay, and if you have any questions, let me know. Okay, guys, happy Thursday. I hope you have a great rest of your day. You can start on that homework and catch up on any other work that some of you still need to do. And Ramon, please talk to me. Hello, Ramon. I want to help you. Let's help Ramon graduate. If you know Ramon, please talk to him. Please talk to him. All right, guys, take care. Have a great, great Garfield Day. I'll see you tomorrow. Take care, everybody.